The diamond engagement ring felt surprisingly light as I slid it from Amelia's finger. Her face, a ruin of tears, reflected the shattered future I had once believed in. Just moments before, my family had offered her warmth and she had repaid them with disdain. I should have seen it sooner. The thing about slow poisons is that you mistake them for nourishment. For 2 years, I had been drinking Amelia's brand of love, a concoction of glittering affection laced with a subtle, tasteless toxin of contempt. We were planning our wedding, a grand affair that Amelia, a public relations manager, was orchestrating with military precision. I, a city planner, was content to handle the logistics, happy to see the joy it brought her. I thought we were building a future. In reality, I was just the foundation she planned to build upon and then bury. The first tremor I chose to ignore happened 6 months ago. We were at my parents' house for Sunday dinner. My mother, whose English is a tapestry woven with the thick melodic threads of her homeland, was telling Amelia a story about my childhood. Her eyes danced as she described, with a voice full of laughter and love, how I once tried to build a bridge for the ants in our backyard using stolen spaghetti sticks. It was a pointless, sweet story, a testament to a mother's memory. Later that evening, back in our minimalist apartment that smelled of white linen and her expensive perfume, Amelia brought it up. "Your mom is just adorable, Elias," she said, curling up next to me. Then, in a pitch-perfect, exaggerated imitation of my mother's accent, she repeated the punchline. "He built a bridge for ZNTS," she laughed, a light, tinkling sound. I stiffened. The sound was so jarringly different from my mother's warm, genuine laughter. Seeing the shift in my expression, she immediately softened her tone, her PR training kicking in. "Oh, honey, don't be like that. It's endearing," she purred, tracing a finger along my jaw. "I was just thinking, maybe we could gently help her with some of her pronunciation before the wedding. Just so my friends from work can understand her speech, you know. I just want our families to blend perfectly." And I, the frog in the slowly warming water, relaxed. Of course, she was just being thoughtful. She was trying to bridge our worlds. I kissed her and told her it was a good idea, ignoring the small, cold knot in my stomach that told me you don't fix a person's history as if it's a typo. The catalyst arrived on a Tuesday, disguised as a moment of respite. I'd been working 14-hour days for a week, pushing to finalize a major urban renewal project. My brain felt like a wrung-out sponge and my body ached. At 3 p.m., my boss took one look at my pale face and ordered me to go home. The thought of surprising Amelia, of collapsing into her arms, was the only thing that propelled me through the door of our apartment. The apartment was quiet, but a sliver of light from under the study door told me she was home. I heard her voice and I smiled, my fatigue momentarily forgotten. I crept closer, ready to swing the door open and surprise her. But then I heard my name, and the tone of her voice made me freeze, my hand hovering over the doorknob. She was on the phone, the speaker amplifying her words into the still air. It was Maya, her maid of honor. "I'm telling you, Maya, you have to be prepared. It's this weekend, the big welcome to the family dinner," Amelia said. Her voice was stripped of its usual honeyed sweetness. In its place was a sharp, brittle cruelty I had never heard before. "It's at their house, God, the noise, the sheer volume of them." A giggle, it was Maya. "And the food," Amelia went on, her voice dripping with disdain. "You'd think they'd have learned to cook something that isn't swimming in grease. It's all this heavy peasant food. My stomach is churning just thinking about it." My blood ran cold. She was talking about my mother's moussaka, my father's grilled lamb, recipes passed down through generations. "And the accent, God, the accent," she sighed dramatically. Then she did it again. She put on a voice, a grotesque caricature of my grandmother, Nana Elena, and my father. It was a clumsy, mocking imitation, turning their warm, rolling cadences into something guttural and foolish. "Hello, Amelia, you eat more, you too skinny." She and Maya burst into laughter, a sound like shattering glass in my ears. I stood there, paralyzed by a shock so profound it felt like a physical blow. My surprise had curdled into a horror story. The final, fatal sentence was what broke the spell. "You just have to endure it, Maya," Amelia said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Once we're married, I have plenty of ways to modernize them a bit. Elias adores me, he'll listen to me." "He'll listen to me." The words echoed in the sudden silence of my mind. In that moment, something inside me snapped. The warmth I felt for her, the future I envisioned, it all just evaporated. With a steadiness that surprised me, I pulled out my phone. My thumb, moving with an eerie, detached calm, found the voice memo app and pressed record. I captured the last 2 minutes of their conversation, the tail end of the laughter, the condescending plans for my family's modernization. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I only knew that I needed proof. I needed to hold the poison in my hand to see it for what it was. I didn't go in, I didn't confront her. The man who would have done that, the man who would have stormed in, demanding an explanation, his heart broken and ready for a fight, had died in the hallway. The person who turned and walked away was someone new, someone colder and much, much quieter. I backed out of the apartment as silently as I had entered and went down to my car. The sanitized air of the underground garage felt suffocating. I sat in the driver's seat, the engine off, and played the recording. The tinny sound of Amelia's voice filled the small space. Her mocking imitation of my grandmother, her laughter, the casual, dismissive way she planned to dismantle my family's identity. I listened to it once, then again, and a third time. With each playback, the recording acted like a key, unlocking a vault of memories I had deliberately kept sealed. Every little incident, every joke I had swallowed, every uncomfortable moment I had rationalized away came rushing back, now cast in the harsh, unforgiving light of this new truth. I remembered her faint, almost imperceptible wrinkle of the nose when I suggested we buy a house in my old neighborhood, the one with the bakeries that smelled of my childhood. "It's a bit ethnic, don't you think, honey? A little loud?" she'd said, steering me toward a sterile downtown condo. I remembered the time I was on the phone with my uncle, slipping naturally into our native tongue. I'd hung up and seen her watching me with a strange look on her face. "It's so aggressive sounding," she'd commented lightly. "English is so much softer." I remembered the shirt. A gift from my aunt, beautifully embroidered with a traditional pattern from our home region. I'd put it on for a friend's party, and Amelia had stopped me at the door. "Maybe something a little more classic, babe. A plain button-down, you have such a great career, you should dress the part." They were all just little paper cuts, insignificant on their own. But now, listening to that recording, I saw they weren't random. They were a pattern, a slow, systematic erosion of who I was. The heartbreak I'd felt upstairs was gone. In its place was a chilling, absolute clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it wasn't a bad joke. It was a fundamental contempt for the very roots that made me who I am. My purpose shifted. This was no longer about salvaging a relationship. It was about correcting a colossal error in judgment. I looked at the phone in my hand, at the audio file that held her true self. A plan began to form, not born of rage, but of a cold, precise sense of justice. She had passed her judgment on my family in private. I would simply allow them to hear it. The verdict would be delivered in the very place she held in such disdain, my home, surrounded by the people I cherished. The day of the dinner arrived with a brilliant, cloudless sky that felt like a cruel joke. I played my part to perfection. In fact, I was a better fiancé in those final hours than I had been in months, because the cold clarity in my veins made it easy to perform the motions of love without the messy interference of actual emotion. I drove to pick her up, my car smelling of the leather cleaner I'd used to erase the memory of my revelation. Amelia was radiant, a vision in a tasteful, cream-colored dress she'd chosen specifically for its inoffensive elegance. It was expensive, impeccably tailored, and utterly devoid of personality, the perfect armor for her infiltration mission. "How do I look?" she asked, doing a little twirl in her doorway, her face a carefully constructed canvas of excitement. "Like you were born for this," I said, and the words were true, just not in the way she heard them. I kissed her cheek. It was like kissing cool, polished marble. She beamed, relieved and satisfied by my easy compliance. She had chalked up my quietness over the past few days to work fatigue, and my agreeable nature was, to her, a sign of my unwavering devotion. She thought she had won. The dinner was held in my parents' backyard, a sprawling, slightly chaotic garden that was my father's pride and joy. The air hummed with life, smelling of night-blooming jasmine, roasting lamb, and the damp earth beneath the tomato vines. The long wooden table was laden with the very dishes she had ridiculed, a vibrant mosaic of our history. The rich, fragrant steam of my mother's galactabarico mingled with the smoky char of my father's lamb chops. And everywhere there was the sound Amelia hated, the loud, joyous, overlapping conversations of my family. They swarmed her with an affection so genuine it was almost overwhelming. My uncle Dino, a large man with a booming laugh and a wine-stained shirt, insisted she have a glass of his potent homemade wine, telling a loud, rambling story about me falling into a grape vat as a child. Amelia laughed, a perfectly timed melodious sound that didn't quite reach her eyes. My Aunt Sophia grasped her hands, exclaiming, "That color. It makes your eyes shine like the Aegean Sea." Amelia smiled graciously, subtly pulling her hands back to avoid smudging her manicure. My own father pulled me aside at one point, his arm slung heavily and proudly over my shoulder. "Look at her, my son," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "She fits right in, you chose well." The words landed like stones in my gut. Then came the moment that would, in retrospect, be the centerpiece of the tragedy. My grandmother, Nana Alina, the undisputed matriarch of our family, made her way slowly through the crowd. She was a small, stooped woman, her hands gnarled from a lifetime of kneading dough and tending her garden, but her eyes were as sharp and clear as ever. In her hands, she held a shawl, a beautiful, intricately woven piece of fabric in deep blues and golds. "For you, Amelia," Nana said, her voice thick with the accent Amelia had so expertly mimicked. She unfolded the shawl, revealing patterns I knew by heart, the olive branch for peace, the interwoven rings for loyalty. My mother wove this for my wedding day. Now it is for yours. She draped it carefully over Amelia's shoulders. I watched, a silent observer at my own life's funeral. I saw the almost imperceptible tightening around Amelia's mouth as the heavy, hand-spun wool settled on the delicate silk of her dress. I saw the flawless mask of humility she wore as she hugged my grandmother, a hug held for just a second too long in a calculated performance of warmth. "Thank you, Nana," she said, her voice catching with practiced emotion. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I'm so honored." I watched the genuine love being offered by my family and the glittering, hollow counterfeit she gave in return. And I felt nothing but the steady, cold beat of the countdown in my chest. The storm was about to break. As dessert was served, thick slices of my mother's galactabarico, a semolina custard pie soaked in syrup, my father stood, tapping his glass for attention. The chatter subsided and all eyes turned to him. He was beaming, his face flushed with wine and happiness. "My friends, my family," he began, his voice thick with emotion. He raised his glass toward Amelia, who was sitting beside me, the garish colors of Nana's shawl a stark contrast to her pale dress. "We are a simple family. We love loudly, we eat well, and our greatest wealth is each other. Elias chose you, Amelia, and so we chose you. We open our hearts and our home to you completely. Welcome, my daughter, welcome to our loud, loving, messy family." A chorus of Opa and cheers erupted. Glasses were raised high. Amelia, bathed in the warm glow of their acceptance, looked every bit the cherished bride-to-be. Her smile was a masterpiece of relieved triumph. This was it, the final hurdle cleared. In that perfect, crystalline moment of celebration, I stood up. A hush fell over the table as I remained standing. I didn't pick up my glass. I simply looked around at the faces of my family, then let my gaze settle on Amelia. Her smile faltered slightly, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. "Thank you, Dad, those are beautiful words," I said, my voice even and calm. "And on that note, before we toast, I think it's only right that we all hear from Amelia herself. I know she has some very strong, very honest feelings about our family, our traditions, and this dinner. She's probably just a little shy to share them so directly." A few of my aunts chuckled, thinking I was teasing her. Amelia's face, however, began to drain of color. The confusion in her eyes was rapidly turning to ice-cold dread. She knew. I reached into my pocket and took out my phone. With a few deliberate taps, I connected it to the small portable speaker I had placed on the table, disguised next to a bowl of fruit. And then I pressed play. Her voice, her real asterisk voice, sharp and condescending, sliced through the warm evening air. "I'm telling you, Maya, you have to be prepared. God, the noise, the sheer volume of them." The sound of my family's laughter died instantly. Forks clattered onto plates, the smiles froze, then melted away, replaced by expressions of stunned disbelief. Heavy peasant food. My stomach is churning just thinking about it. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with hurt. My father's face, moments ago so full of pride, slowly hardened into a mask of stone. And the accent, God, the accent. Then came her cruel, exaggerated imitation of my grandmother's voice. I saw Nana Alina flinch as if struck. The recording continued, relentless and clear. It ended with the final, damning declaration: "Once we're married, I have plenty of ways to modernize them a bit. Elias adores me, he'll listen to me." Silence, a profound, suffocating silence descended upon the garden, broken only by the chirping of crickets, suddenly deafeningly loud. Amelia was ashen, her face a ghastly white. She stared at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and fury. "Elias," she whispered, her voice trembling. Then, finding a shred of her old command, she tried to salvage the unsalvageable. "No, that's not it, was a joke, a private joke. Elias, you can't do this to me. I was just venting to Maya, it didn't mean anything." But her frantic words were hollow. They bounced off the wall of silence her own voice had built. No one was looking at her with anger. It was worse, they were looking at her with pity and a quiet, profound disgust. The performance was over, the mask was shattered, and everyone had seen the truth. No one responded to Amelia's frantic denials. Her words, once so powerful in their ability to shape reality, were now just pathetic noise in the wreckage she had created. The silence held, thick and heavy with judgment. Then a chair scraped against the stone patio. Nana Alina rose to her feet. She moved with a slow, deliberate grace that defied her age. Every eye followed her as she walked around the table, her small frame casting a long shadow in the evening light. She stopped not in front of me, but in front of Amelia. She didn't say a word. She simply reached out with her gnarled, steady hands and took the ends of the shawl that rested on Amelia's shoulders. She lifted it off, her movements ceremonial and precise, as if reclaiming a sacred object from a desecrated altar. She folded it neatly, smoothing the creases with a tenderness that was more damning than any shout could have been. With the folded shawl held in one arm, she finally looked at me. Her eyes, dark and ancient, were not filled with anger but with a deep, sorrowful wisdom. And when she spoke, she used the same voice Amelia had mocked, slow, thick with the accent of her homeland, but each word was imbued with the weight of absolute authority. "Elia's my boy," she said, her voice carrying across the silent yard. "A woman who looks down on where you come from does not deserve to walk into your future." The words were a pronouncement. A verdict. They weren't a suggestion, they were a statement of immutable truth, a law of nature I had forgotten. In that moment, the last vestiges of any doubt, any lingering sentimentality I might have harbored, were burned away. My grandmother had given me not only permission but an imperative. She had reminded me who I was. I gave her a deep, grateful nod. Then I turned to Amelia. Her face was a ruin. The beautiful mask was gone, and beneath it was something ugly and desperate. Tears were streaming down her cheeks, but they elicited no sympathy from me. They were tears for herself, for the future she had just lost. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply met her gaze, and with a calm finality, I reached for her left hand. Her fingers were stiff and cold. I gently but firmly slid the diamond engagement ring off her finger. It felt surprisingly light. I placed it on the table next to her untouched plate of dessert. The diamond caught the light, a tiny, brilliant star of a future that would never happen. "I agree with my grandmother," I said, my voice quiet but clear enough for everyone to hear. "We're done." 3 months later, the scent of charcoal and rosemary filled the same backyard. The long table was set again, but the atmosphere was entirely different. It was lighter, easier. My Uncle Dino was telling another one of his loud, rambling stories, and this time my laughter was genuine, unburdened. We were celebrating nothing in particular, just a sunny Saturday, good food, and the simple, unassailable fact of being together. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't realized I'd been missing for 2 years, a feeling of being wholly and completely myself. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a message from a mutual friend, one of the few who hadn't been immediately collateralized in the explosion of my and Amelia's breakup. "Hey man, hope you're doing okay. Just FYI, Amelia's been asking about you. She's not doing great. A lot of people from her circle heard what happened and have distanced themselves. She told Maya she completely destroyed the best thing in her life. She's a mess, just thought you should know." I read the message, feeling a distant, clinical sort of pity, the kind one might feel for a stranger's misfortune in a news article. There was no triumph, no desire for her to suffer more. There was just nothing. Her regret was a currency that no longer had any value in my economy. I held my thumb over the screen for a second, then deleted the message and slipped the phone back into my pocket without replying. I looked up and saw my Nana Elena watching me from across the yard. She had a small, knowing smile on her face. She held up a piece of grilled halloumi cheese, charred and glistening, and beckoned me over with a slight nod of her head. I walked toward her into the heart of my loud, loving, messy family. As she handed me the warm, salty cheese, the sun fell on my face. I realized in that moment that I hadn't just been defending my family that night. I had been fighting for myself. I hadn't lost a future I wanted. I had narrowly escaped a future that would have required me to amputate my own past. I hadn't destroyed anything. I had simply stepped away from the rubble and walked back home.